大家好，欢迎收看奇幻之旅。我们都知道，学习英语的好处，它不仅是身份和地位的象征，一口流利的英语还能展现你的教育水平。掌握英语，再加上一项专业技能，在国外几乎无敌。相比在国内送外卖或跑网约车，学好英语对个人及家庭的未来都有深远影响。对于普通人来说，没有背景，没有门路，英语就是改变命运的最佳途径。道理大家都懂，但如何才能学好英语呢？为什么别人都能轻松说好英语，我就不行？如果我告诉你，英语不是学习问题，而是一个心理问题，当你看见外国人心里紧张的要命，又怕说错话出丑，其实你的大脑已经宕机了，就算你背了很多单词，也说不出口。其次，学英语不需要你背很多单词，就算你只有300个词汇量，也能应付日常生活。在进入正题前，请动动您的小手订阅、点赞、留言，支持我们制作更精彩的节目。谢谢大家。在学英语这个过程中，我可以不夸张地说，绝大多数中文教育都在误导学生。一是误导大家先学语法，二是误导大家先背单词。如果你从这个切入点入手，大多数人学不会，中途就放弃了。这就是我们很多中国学生英语硬是学不会的主要原因。在这方面，我苦苦寻找，终于有一天，我听到一位加拿大教师的演讲，明白了问题的原因。我们先来听听他是怎么说的。
So for the past 20 years, I've been helping Malaysians and other Southeast Asians to speak better English. And through training thousands of Southeast Asians, I've discovered a very surprising truth. I've discovered that how well somebody communicates in English actually has very little to do with their English level. It has a lot to do with their attitude towards English. There are people out there who have a very, very low level of English and they can communicate very, very well. One of them that I remember was a student, a participant of mine named Faisal. He was a factory supervisor. English level very, very low. But this guy could just sit and listen to anybody very calmly, clearly, and then he could respond, absolutely express his thoughts beautifully at a very low level of English. So today I want to share with you what is so different about people like Faisal. How do they do it? And second of all, why is this so important, not only to you, but to your children, to your community, and to the future of Malaysia? And third of all, what's one thing you can do, starting today, if you want to speak with that calm, clear confidence that people like Faisal has? So first of all, what is so different? How do people like Faisal do it? So to answer that question, I'm going to take you back about 10 years, okay? So I was training staff at that time, and my daughter at that time was taking piano lessons. And I started to notice two really strong similarities between my daughter's attitude or thinking towards playing the piano and a lot of Malaysians' thinking or attitude towards English. Now, first of all, I should tell you, my daughter absolutely hated piano, hated the lessons, hated practicing. This is my daughter practicing piano, okay? This is as good as it got. This is the real thing. And she dreaded going to piano lessons because to my daughter, going to piano lessons, she was filled with this sort of dread because it was all about not screwing up, right? Because like for a lot of piano students, to both my daughter and her teacher, her success in piano was measured by how few mistakes she made. Now, at the same time, I noticed that a lot of Malaysians went into English conversations with the same sort of feeling of dread, this sort of feeling that they were going to be judged by how many mistakes they were going to make and whether or not they were going to screw up. Now, the second similarity that I noticed was to do with self-image. You see, my daughter, she knew what good piano sounded like, right? Because we've all heard good piano. And she knew what her level was, and she knew how long she'd have to play for to play like that. And a lot of Malaysians, I noticed, had this idea of what good, proper English is supposed to sound like, and what their, I see a lot of you nodding, and what their English sounded like, and how far they'd have to go to get there. And they also felt like they were, like my daughter, just bad. Bad piano player, bad English speaker, right? My English not so good lah, cannot, sorry ah, shaya, cannot ah. So I could see these similarities, but I still couldn't figure out, okay, what is it about these people like Faisal that are so different, that can just do it smoothly, calmly, with confidence? And one day I discovered that answer, and I discovered it quite by chance. It was a day when my computer broke down and I had to go to a cyber cafe. Now, okay, it was my first time, and I discovered cyber cafes are disgusting places, okay? They're really gross. They're smelly, and they're filled with boys, and they're all playing noisy, violent games. They're just disgusting places. But I had to go there. So I sit down, and I start noticing this guy beside me, and I become very, very interested in this guy next to me. Now, this guy is playing this game that is basically, it's like shooting people until they die, and that's it, right? That's the game, right? And I'm noticing that this guy is not very good. He's like, in fact, terrible, right? Because I'm looking and I'm seeing like a lot of shooting and not much dying, right? But what really interested me was behind this lousy player were three of his friends sort of standing there watching him play. And what I really noticed was, even though this guy was terrible, even though his friends were watching him, there was no embarrassment. There was no feeling of being judged. There was no shyness. In fact, quite the opposite. This guy's like totally focused on the bad guy, smile on his face. All he can think about is killing these guys, right? And I'm watching him, and I suddenly realized, this is it. This is the same attitude that people like Faisal have when they speak English. Just like this guy, when Faisal goes into an English conversation, he doesn't feel judged. He's entirely focused on the person that he's speaking to and the result he wants to get. He's got no self-awareness, no thoughts about his own mistakes. Now, I want to share with you a real, true example to paint a picture of somebody who speaks English like they're playing piano and someone who speaks English like they're playing a computer game. And this is a true story. Happened to me. A while ago, I was in a pharmacy. I had to buy Omega. My doctor said I should get Omega. And I go to the shelf, there's tons of Omega. There's Omega that's high in DHA, Omega that's high in EPA, and I don't know which one to buy. Now, the sales rep happened to be there, and I saw she was like this well-dressed professional woman. I walk over to her, and I see this look as she sees me, this sort of, it's a look I recognize very well. Her eyes go all wide. It's sort of that panic, oh my God, I gotta speak to a native speaker, and she's gonna judge me and notice my mistakes. I go up to her, and I explain my situation, which Omega do I get? And she starts explaining to me everything about DHA and EPA you could possibly imagine. She speaks very quickly, goes all around in circles, and when she finishes, no idea what to buy, right? So I turn to the girl behind the counter. Now, the girl behind the counter, I heard her before, her English level is very low. But when I walk over to her, this girl, there's no fear. In fact, she's just looking at me. You know that look? Like, yeah, okay, so how? Right. Yeah, I've been in Malaysia a long time. So I go up to her and I explain the problem, EPA, DHA. She looks at me, she says, okay, EPA for heart, DHA for brain. Your heart okay or not? So I said, yeah, I said my heart is really, I think it's pretty good. She says, your brain okay or not? I said, yeah, no. No, my brain is not as good as it used to be. She looked, she said, okay la, you take omega DHA, can? Problem solved, right? So we've got two different kinds of communicators. We've got the one who's got a high level, but totally focused on herself and getting it right, and therefore very ineffective. We've got another one, low level, totally focused on the person she's talking to and getting a result, effective. And therein lies the difference. Now, why is this distinction so important, not just to you, to your children, but to the future of Malaysia and countries like Malaysia? And to answer that, let's take a look at who actually is speaking English in the world today, okay? So if we looked at all of the English conversations in the whole world taking place right now on planet Earth, we would see that for every native speaker, like me, there are 5 non-native speakers. And if we listen to every conversation in English on planet Earth right now, we would notice that 96% of those conversations involved non-native English speakers. Only 4% of those conversations are native speaker to native speaker. This is not my language anymore. This language belongs to you. It's not an art to be mastered. It's just a tool to use to get a result. And I want to give you a real-life example of what English is today in the world, real English today. This is another true story. I was at a barbecue a little while ago. This was a barbecue for engineers from all over the world, and they were making hot dogs. Now, some of the hot dogs were regular hot dogs, and some were these cheese hot dogs, you know, with the cheese in the middle. French engineer is cooking the hot dogs, and he turns to this Korean engineer and he says, would you like a hot dog? And the Korean guy says, yes, please. He says, do you want the cheese? And the Korean guy looks around at the table. He says, I no see cheese. French guy says, the hot dog contains the cheese. Korean guy doesn't understand him, right? So the French engineer tries again. The hot dog is making from with the cheese. Korean guy still doesn't understand. He tries again. He says, the hot dog is coming from, no, the cheese is coming from the hot dog. Korean guy cannot understand. Now this Japanese engineer who's been listening to this conversation turns to the Korean engineer and he says, cheese integrator. He understands, okay? Everybody understands. So this is what English is today. It's just a tool to play around with to get a result, like a computer game. Now the challenge is that we know in schools all around the world, right? English is not really being taught like it's a tool to play with. It's still being taught like it's an art to master. And students are judged more on correctness than on clarity. Some of you might remember the old comprehension exam in school. Does anybody remember in school when you would get a question about a text that you read? You'd have to read through some text, right? And then answer a question to show that you understood the text. And this may have happened to you, that you showed that you understood the text, but you got a big X because you made a little grammar mistake. Like this student. Now this student clearly understood paragraph 4, but no, not correct, because he left the letter N off the word environment. But in the real world, what would matter? In the real world, what would matter is, did you understand the email or did you understand your customer so that you can go ahead and take action? Now the problem that I see here over and over is that people take the attitude they developed about English in school and they bring it into their adult life and into their work. And if you're in a stressful situation and you're having a conversation and you're trying to give a result to someone and say it correctly, your brain multitasks. It cannot do two things at once. And what I see is the brain just shutting down. And you may recognize these three symptoms of the brain shutting down. The first one is that your listening goes. Someone's talking to you and you're so busy thinking about how you're going to respond and express yourself correctly, you don't actually hear what the other person said. And I can see a lot of nodding in the audience. The second thing to go is your speaking. Your mind sort of shuts down and that vocabulary you do know just disappears and the words don't come out. The third thing to go is your confidence. And the worst thing about this is you may only be confident because you cannot express yourself clearly, but to the person talking to you, they may misunderstand this as a lack of confidence in your ability to do the job, to perform. So if you want to speak English like Faisal with that great confidence, here's the one thing that you can do. When you speak, don't focus on yourself. Focus on the other person and the result you want to achieve. Imagine a next generation of Malaysians, all with that wonderful confidence in communication that Faisal has at any level of English. Because let's remember that English today, it's not an art to be mastered. It's just a tool to use to get a result. And that tool belongs to you. Thank you.
刚才我们听了这段精彩的演讲，说明什么？是不是说明学英语实际是一个心理问题，而不是一个学习能力的问题？我们在学英语的过程中，要关注对方的需求，注重于说话的那个人，而不是一开始就在大脑里找词，以至于对方说的话根本顾不过来听，又或者因为害羞怕出丑、怕犯错误而不敢说话。如果是这种情况，从今天起我们就要纠正过来了，大胆地开口说，从听开始，不断跟读，不要在乎你懂不懂意思，一味地听读，给自己一个信心，告诉自己我能和老师说的一样好，循环往复。我相信用不了几个月，你的语感就上来了。那么解决了心理问题，接下来我们还是不懂意思，该怎么办呢？我先问问你，你认识多少英语单词？1000、5000、10000。但即使你认识1万个单词，你可能仍然无法进行一次简单的对话。为什么？因为你掉进了单词的陷阱。今天我要告诉你这个陷阱到底是什么。为什么几乎所有人都在错误地学习英语？听完这段视频，你会明白，要说好英语，根本不需要背字典，你只需要学会如何用300个单词进行真正的交流。我学英语8年，认识上万个单词，能读英文书，能写完美的邮件，但遇到一个英语母语者时，硬是一句话都说不出来。这是不是很熟悉？全世界数百万人都在经历同样的困惑。他们像收集邮票一样收集单词，却无法在现实生活中使用它们。这就是单词陷阱。你以为要会说英语，就得认识很多单词。于是你背单词表，记单词书，每天10个新词。但结果是，你太专注于记，却忘了用。你成了单词收集者，不是语言使用者。想想看，一个厨子他不需要知道所有食材，他只需要用最基本的食材，也能做出美味的菜。英语也是一样，你不需要所有单词，你只需要能熟练使用最常见的那一部分。 科学研究发现，英语母语者每天说话时，平均只使用大约1500个不同的单词，而其中最常见的300个单词占了日常口语的65%。换句话说，只要掌握300个单词，你就能进行大多数日常交流。这些基础单词的力量非常强大。比如 get 这个词 ，get up、get down、get ready、get better， 一个词上百种用法，这就是基础词汇的魔力。真正的流利不是认识多少单词，而是能否自然、快速地使用简单词。想想婴儿是怎么学说话的，他们不会背单词，他们只是反复说妈妈、爸爸、要、不要。这些简单的词慢慢变得自然，他们就能脱口而出。英语也是一样，让简单的词成为你的本能反应。想走出300字陷阱，你需要5步。第一，停止收集新词。第二，挑选出300个最常用的单词。第三，用它们造句、练习、反复使用。第四，每天组合新句子。第五，大胆说，不怕简单。记住，简单就是力量。这就是300字公式：100个名词、100个动词、100个形容词与常用词。有了这300个词，你几乎可以说任何话。讲一天、谈感受、问问题、讲故事都够用了。复杂句 I am experiencing great difficulty understanding this information。简单句 I don't understand this。哪个更好？当然是后者。清晰、快速、自然，这就是母语者的表达方式。每天早上从你的300词表中选几个单词，每个单词造10个句子，大声朗读15分钟。坚持30天，这些句子会成为你的自然反应，比背100个新单词有效10倍。为什么多数人失败？因为他们想听起来高级，他们追求复杂，却忘了沟通的目的：清晰。沟通不是炫耀，是连接。简单的词才是最有力量的语言。当你熟练使用这些简单词，你会发现自己更自信，因为你知道你能清楚地表达自己。自信的人说话更有力量。从今天开始，不再买词汇书，选出你的300个核心单词，打印出来贴在墙上，每天造句、说话、思考。这就是你的30天挑战。在接下来的30天，不学新词，只练这300个词，你会惊讶地发现自己说得更流利、更自然、更自信。英语学习其实并不复杂，你不需要知道一切，只要知道足够多。300个单词就够了。别再陷入单词陷阱。从今天开始，用你已经会的单词表达你的想法。世界在等你说，简单的说，清楚的说，自信的说。好了，今天的节目就到这里，欢迎大家留言、评论、点赞，祝大家心想事成，都能实现英语梦。